Okay, Carolyn, my clock says 1 o'clock. Do you want to get started?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast, and good morning if you're out on the West Coast. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, QuickBooks Best Practices for Nonprofits. And my name is Stephen Dadak, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. And today I'm joined by our guest. She's accounting expert Carolyn Sechler. Hey there, Carolyn.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. And for those of you, yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. And for those of you who don't know Carolyn, CEO and founder of Sechler CPA PC. They're a certified B Corporation. They're out in Phoenix, Arizona. And Carolyn brings over 30 years of experience to her work in tax and strategic planning, financial reporting, management consulting, and executive coaching, primarily to nonprofits. And actually, Accounting Today magazine selected Carolyn as one of the top 100 most influential people in the profession, and she works with over 400 domestic and international nonprofit clients. So Carolyn, it's just a treat to have you here today to share all your knowledge with us, so thanks again.
Sure.
And so what's going to happen today is I'm going to hand things off to Carolyn, and she's actually going to do a dive right into QuickBooks right here on the screen. She's actually going to be broadcasting right out of QuickBooks for the whole presentation rather than using slides. This is going to be a really neat, kind of an interactive, unique presentation, and we hope you all enjoy it. And when she's done running through the things she wants to show, we'll jump right into a Q&A session. So as she's talking, feel free to send any questions our way. I'll see them and she'll see them as well. And we'll try to answer just as many as possible before the 2 o'clock Eastern hour. So don't be shy about sending any questions our way. And just for everyone's reference, I will be recording the presentation and sending out a link to the video a little later this afternoon. So if you have to duck out early, you'll be able to see everything in its entirety or review the presentation a little later on. So I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to hand things off to Carolyn. So Carolyn, take it away for us.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to be doing all of this on QuickBooks Online because that's my primary go-to piece of software. QuickBooks has obviously a lot of versions, desktop, nonprofit version, etc. Most of what I'm showing you can do on all of those versions. I'll let you know if there's something that you can only do on online. And what I'm going to do is just take you through the kind of basics I show people when I am giving a training, and let you use some of the tools you might not realize are available to you, or just remind you again about it. I see I have a couple of ringers on my list here of people I work with that I know how to do some of this stuff. So I'm looking forward to your questions for me. All right, so you're looking at just a login screen on the older version. Now they do have a new face that they're rolling out called Harmony. So you're going to start to see that if you're in QuickBooks Online, and it's to give you more of a dashboard look that gives you some reports up front, but otherwise functionality is the same. And if you are on Harmony and need some help with that later on, you're welcome to email me and I can help you through translating what we're talking about into that. Basically, we're going to jump into reports on this exercise and talk about some of the things that you might want to do in order to make sure your reports provide better information to you when you're trying to report out to your board or do some management decision making, things like that. If I speak too fast or too softly, please let us know, and I'll be sure to change my pace or my volume. Just very simply using the tabs at the top, using reports and profit and loss. If you want to just see how you're doing in this period, presumably you've at least known how to do this, and maybe you're not quite sure how to use these customized features. So whenever you go into a screen, there's a button that says Customize on it that you can press. And you've got some choices in here besides your date range. You can always change your date ranges. So I could select last year, for instance, and I can decide whether I want to be cash or accrual, which is outside the scope, really, of this conversation. Expand or collapse means do I want to show all of the sub-accounts or just the primary account. So we'll leave it expanded for the moment. And then what I like to do is, at the very minimum, I like to remove the non-zero accounts so that I don't have that stuff bothering me when I want to look at things. And then on columns, I recommend that at the minimum you use classes. If you haven't set up classes before, you can go into your company preferences. there, preferences, and you can turn on the class feature in here. But let's just go back to that because I don't want to take up your time with that part of it. And again, you'll have my email address, so if we go over things and you say, could you do that one more time for me, I will be happy to review it with you. The one thing we like about QuickBooks Online is that I can be in there with you, so we can share the screen, wander around together. So let's go ahead and look at a report by class. Let me take out my non-zeros again. All right, so here's a report that shows all of my departments. So think of classes as departments. And one of the pitfalls we'll see occurring in a set of books we work with as an organization is some confusion about the difference between a class and an account. And you want to, when you're deciding what your format is going to be, try to think about, oh, somebody's not seeing anything on their window. I'm guessing you're going to work on that?
Yeah, I'll work on that, Carolyn.
Okay,
I'll work on that in the chat.
I just noticed that. Sorry. Okay, so I'll try to be verbally clear for those who aren't yet seeing the image. It's important to think about the distinction between class and account. An account should be something that is a type of expenditure or a type of revenue, but not the name of an event or like I'm not that crazy about membership being a department, but in this case, the membership's a department. Training events, they might have several types of training events. And so you would have training events as a department, and those training events would have different kinds of expenditures related to them. Let me show you. Okay, so let me see, we'll do look at a class list so I can show you that. Reports, if you don't use this is a simple way to get to reports in here. I know other ways, but I'll use this one to show you how to get to lists. And here's the class listing. So here's the list of all the classes for this test organization. Fundraising, management, and programs are the primaries. And then under programs, we've got annual meeting, community service, membership, training, because for this particular entity, all right, and I'm thinking maybe I'll go back just a little bit further for those who aren't that comfortable with the functional areas in nonprofits. The three functional areas of a nonprofit are fundraising. I only spend this money to raise money. Management in general, it's what any business would spend money on, and programs directly or in some way related to my mission. So that's broken out. So I want to be able to report out how I'm doing in those areas by creating classes or departments to show me how I'm doing in those areas. If I want to see just how is my community service area doing, there's not very much activity in here. Let's put some more activity in here by using all dates. Okay, so here's my community service, which just still doesn't have much. Let's use training events. So here's training events. It's got revenues, expenses, and let's say I want to see everything that's happened in here. I can always press that bottom total number and look at all of the activities that are happening in just that department. As an alternative for a report, I can customize reports that are in classes, and down in this list section, under lists, I can say I want to specify one class. I have to do this twice, interestingly. Then go down to training events and say I just want to have just the training events and nothing else. It takes a couple steps to do this, but I'll show you what the real cool thing is. Once you've done that special report for the one particular department you want to look at, then you go back in, change the columns to total only, and run the report. And now all you have is that particular department. And because that still may not be clear to you what that is, since we've just customized this to training events, then I would also customize the title to include that. And then you can do one more step if you want to, and you can say, show it to me by years. So I want to see everything that's going on in my training events year by year. And let's say that I've set this at all dates. I could have set it for a specific date range. If I had, it would have identified the date range. But if I set this up for all dates, Sherry, you're talking about, I saw your note about class and departments. We're going to talk about departments in a minute. First, this is just classes. Then I'll go into departments after that. And I'm sorry, I know I'm probably not supposed to be looking at the chat screen, but I am because I want to make sure I'm not missing things you guys want to talk about. So this presently is a report by class specified to a particular class, and within that class showing you what's happened year by year. So it's for analytical purposes. You're thinking about whether you should repeat something, or you're wondering who gave you money, so I could go back and look at who gave me sponsorships in 2010 by clicking on that. And let's say I might want to look at this every single month, but I don't want to try to remember all the steps I went through. I can press the Memorize button. And then I'm going to memorize the report, profit and loss, training events. I can add this to a set of my, let's say, management reports maybe. All right, and so I'm going to create a group of reports called management reports, and I'm going to share it with anybody else who's a user so that they can also look at it if they want to. So now I've got that report set in there, and I can go to my balance sheet and then say, oh shoot, I want to look at that report again. I go to Memorize Reports, and I'm going to find my management reports. There it is, training events, and there's my report again. And because I set it at all dates, it's going to show all the way up to today. So if I ran this tomorrow, it'll be through March 19th, 2014. In addition, let's go back through the classes a little further. So when I'm working on my profit and loss by class, do that again, report. So I'm going back to the full profit and loss by class. And let's say I've looked at this $5,000 and I said, that does not belong in that particular one. In fact, we've set up a new class. I can do that new class on the fly. I can say it's going to be the XYZ special event. And I can hit enter, and it'll say, what do you want to do? And I can say, I want to add that as a class. So that's now a class. And now I can move this. I can see that that's going to be there, and I run my report. Reports, profit and loss by class. Now I've got my XYZ event sitting over there. So that's a new piece of my programs, and it's got expenditures in here. All right, and as I showed you before, if I want to see what my total expenses or revenue for a particular area is, I only need to hit that bottom, those totals. Anything that turns blue and underlines, you can get details on. So if I wanted to say, I want to see what all is going on in, well, they only have one expense in it. Let's see if we can get some more data again. Because this is my test company, I don't always have tons. There's something with some more data in it. Okay, so let's say I want to see what's going on in registration fees. I can look at each individual one, or I can say overall I want to see what's going on in registration fees. So I could either go to my far right column and pick totals to see what is in that activity area, or I can look at individual ones and only look at the 1,500. And if you haven't used QuickBooks for a while, or you don't know this, you can always click all the way through to the main activity. All right, so those are what I can do with my classes. Now let's say under training events, I've got 3 different events. I don't want this to run all the way across the page, 5 columns of, have this thing run 20 columns. So I can insert what are called departments, or you can use their names for it. Let's see what their name alternatives are. I think locations, Greg uses businesses. Let me find the list. That's the name of donors. Here, so we can use business, department, division, location, property, store, territory. In this particular one, we're going to use location. So consider that like a subclass. And rather than creating a huge class list, we create a department or a location list. And it's, again, just to keep the clutter down. So I can run a profit and loss by locations. And that's only going to give me those sub-programs and not all of the huge details. So these are segments of those items you saw on the profit or loss per class. Oh, and I will slow down. I see notes. I'm sorry about that. So let me go back and show you again how I just did that. I'm going to customize a profit and loss, and I'm going to use the customized, the identity will be locations in this case. It would be whatever identity you chose on that list. So here's the locations. All right, so I can see what's going on just in training track 1 versus the general training. So I'm going to show you how you actually make the entries to make this happen, but I wanted you to see the reports first. Do all dates. If you can see, for those of you who are having trouble seeing, I'm going to try to talk more about what I'm doing. I can choose all dates to look at the entire operation and what has happened from the beginning of time that I've used this software. And I can see how I've performed. The value of that is when you're doing some planning and you're trying to do some work on what events to run or what programs to run, it may be helpful to look back at other programs that you've run in the past or what your successes have been perhaps in a program. For instance, in the Senior Center, maybe I want to look and see who my donors have been over the years. And maybe I'll find out that there's a person who hasn't been called in a while. So that's an advantage in looking back to these older donors. Okay. And again, customize this report, or I can further customize this and say I only want to look at specific locations. Maybe I have a committee who has responsibility for a couple of things. They're responsible for the training events and for the annual meeting. And go over there. I have to add them one at a time. Let's see. All right. All right, so we've got a couple of different training events in here, and then I can say once again I want to memorize this report so I don't forget how to find it again. And I would give it a title. Excuse me, I would go down and give it a title. So I'll go to non-zero and a title. All right, so I've created some memorized reports. We've talked briefly, this is only a 1-hour presentation, so I know we're not going as in-depth on classes and departments as you might like. I am available by email afterwards so that if there's more questions, feel free to let me know. So let's just say for now that we've identified these profit and loss by class reports and these profit and loss by location reports, and we're thinking about wanting some of our individual groups or committees to be able to get some of these reports from time to time. I don't know how many of you have used memorized reports, but one of the really nice features on the online version is when I have a set of reports, like this is balance sheets and profits and losses, for instance, or the audit committee perhaps, I can set my reports up, highlight the group of reports that I want to send out, use the edit feature to select an email for this group and a timing. So let's say I want this to go out every week. Maybe we're working on an event that's coming up right away and I want it to be every Friday. I want it to appear after, and I want it to go on for 5 weeks. And after 5 occurrences, okay. And lucky for everyone, this will be recorded so you can go back and review it later. And so I'm going to say I'll send this to myself so that we don't have it going all over the place. And then I can put whatever notes I want to. And then I can say I'd like it attached as an Excel schedule as opposed to just having it a PDF so they've got something to work with. I save it, and now I don't need to do anything. At midnight each of those weeks, they will come down and it'll show up in people's mailboxes, whatever addresses I've created on there. I find this to be really handy when you're working with committees, and also we'll set board reports up that way for organizations so that every Friday, perhaps the executive director has a set of reports. They don't even have to log in. It shows up on their screen. It could be anything, though. You might have a report that you want to see of how you're doing in receivables, or so let's say vendors. Maybe you want to see your accounts payable aging report, and you want to see it. There may not be any real data. There's not real great data in here, but if this had wonderful data in here, you could add this to a report of management reports like that. And then you can be included in the timing of the reports you were sending out on a regular basis, or you can set up special timing. So I'm hoping that you will think about classes again as departments, as segments of your operation, primary, the higher level of your operation, and departments, locations, whatever word you want to use for that, as the sub-level. And the beauty of it, again, is to take the clutter out of the management level report that your board has to look at, or the executive summary type report, and be able to have it at a secondary level with much more robust detail. We've talked a little bit about memorizing and send. One of the pitfalls we see occurring often with organizations is knowing the distinction between vendors and donors. So when you're writing a check, you should be writing a check to a vendor. Let me go write a check here. So I'm going to look at my list. I'm going to write a check to somebody, and I'm going to make sure that it says vendor next to their name. If I try to write a check to donor, it'll write to the donor, but it won't show up properly when I try to run other reports about how did I spend money in different ways. It will show up as an expense, but if I try to analyze my vendors, it's not going to show up because I've used my donors. And one of the tricks we use is we might put a -D next to a donor so we don't make that mistake, or a -V next to a vendor so we don't make that mistake. But you might want to come up with some kind of a technique, because the thing about QuickBooks, at least as a tool, is if I tried to type in something like my name, it's going to default to vendor. And if you don't take the time to make sure that you're thinking about, is that really a donor? Is that really an employee? It'll make something a vendor. Now when you're writing a check, that's fine. But if you're making a deposit, let's make a deposit. If you're making a deposit, you want to make a deposit, make sure it's from a donor. So make that distinction: donors, deposits, vendors, payments, whatever that you need to do to make sure that that happens that way. We talked about locations and classes. Here's the implementation of locations and classes. So let's say Good Works Foundation, which is a donor, has given us money. So let's say they've given us some registration fees. And I'm going to think about specifically what are they participating in that happens to be one of my program areas. So I'm going to say they're going to be in track 2. So now this donation, this deposit will be going to track 2. And I'm going to say that it's a training event. So within training events, I have track 2. So I'm going to have on one set of reports, the amount that they paid me is going to show up as, and I'll show you it showing up. Let's run a report. Profit and loss. Customized by class. So there's that amount showing up in my Department of Training events. And now if I switch to my locations, I'm going to distinct reference to it in track 2. So hopefully it gives you some kind of an example of how we make that distinction between classes and locations. Okay. So this gives me my primary look. And I could change my mind later and make XYZ special event a location instead of a class. So I have that kind of flexibility. All right. So let's go to another report. Another go-to report I like to use when I'm looking at profit and loss for analysis purposes, since this is a little tips and tricks thing, is I will change my transaction date to all dates, customize by year, run report, and I'm going to look at all of my activity year to year. Now I can always hit this collapse button. And Greg, yes, the default report attachment is a PDF. You have to mark a box when you want to do a memorized report as an Excel. That was the question that was just asked. Okay, so I'm looking at a collapsed version of my profit and loss year to year. Now, granted, there's not a lot of activity in this particular sample company, but in your sample company, when you look at 4 or 5 years and you can start to see some trends and you keep your expense and your revenue section nice and condensed, even when this is expanded, it's still pretty condensed. It doesn't have a lot of 5 ways to say office expense, 35 ways to say printing. Try to really be succinct in your list for your list of accounts and your of income and expense. And then take a look at it from a collapsed version. This is a nice report to send to your treasurer, your president maybe, maybe as they start or partway through the year, see how you're doing. This is how we're performing. You look at this and you say, wow, what was going on? What events were we having in that year? And start to look back at what was going on. Maybe that's an event we want to repeat. You know, why is this going down? Why is this going up? That kind of stuff. So I like looking at it from that standpoint. If you haven't reviewed Company Snapshot, that's another nice way to look at things if you're more visual. So that is just a button next to report list. It's also listed on the report list. And you can, every one of these segments is drillable. So you can look at that and say total net revenue, click, and now you've got all the details. And you can say, instead of this year to date, it can be last year. There's your picture of income for last year. There's your picture of expenses for last year. Not all that fascinating because everything was just in a couple of categories, but let's see if there's nothing last month. So let's say this year to date. Okay, so again, I can look into this, click in it, get the trend, and look at this again and say, oh, that's training track 1. That should have been training track 2. Let me fix that right now. Save. Okay. Now you may wonder what happens if somebody's fixing these things. How could that mess up your records maybe? There's a nice thing that I really like that's on the online version. It's called the activity log. And that lets me see who is messing around in here. So I can see Dawn was in here at some point. I can see that something that I was doing, let's say here's where I edited that transaction. I can go out and look at the history of that edit, and I can see exactly what was going on with that edit. Okay, so there's no hiding. You can't secretly wander around, but it goes to the issue of making sure that each person who uses, if you're in QuickBooks Online, making sure that each person who uses QuickBooks Online has their very own login, because you want their identity to be the way that you find out how something happened. You say, how did a check get voided? You want to be able to look at that check. Let's look. Reports, balance sheet. Just going to look at a bank transaction, all dates. This is a major overview of this software, but let's say we're going to look at this. We want to see who put that in. I can scroll down to related, and I can look at history of changes to this and see who worked on it. If somebody had voided it, I'd be able to see that. So again, I don't have stock into it, and I don't make any commissions off of convincing you to do this, but we found it to be a great tool for things like that, and I particularly like online because of the fact it's got this this tool that lets me see who's been using the software and who made that transaction. There's also a find tool that you may or may not have used when somebody calls up and says, did you get my check for so-and-so for this thing? So you can type in a check, payee, Ben Franklin, find anything okay, here's the transactions we've got with Ben Franklin. If it was, did you mean this check or did you mean this check? And I can look at the checks and I can say, yes, I got it, or I didn't get it. Or you can be as vague as, you can be exact, you can be vague, you can say, okay, I think it was, I want to see a journal entry that had Ben Franklin in it. And they'll say, nope, there weren't any. Let's see, refund, payment from a donor. Did I get a payment from a donor for some reason? No, I didn't. But this is a great little tool that when I'm trying to find something in a hurry, I can look by using this little identity here that's a magnifying glass. All right. I don't know if you've used Scorecard yet, but Scorecard is a tool that lets you see how you measure up against other similar organizations. There's a technique for identifying the kind of industry you are over here. You can say that my income is less than 100,000 or 100,000 to 250. This is how you measure up net profit margin against other groups, what your score is against your peers. And I can look at just income against peers or expenses. So you or your board might have a desire to see things in different kind of details. So I find some of these scorecard tools are nice to be able to share with people. Okay, and let's see if they're clickable. I never checked before. Nope, they're not clickable, but they do have something that comes over. It says, earn 98% of my income from uncategorized. My peers earn 65% of the income from uncategorized. So that's sad because in this sub-industry that I've chosen, people aren't categorizing their income, so we're not able to actually see the types. But depending on what you were to choose as the type of industry you were in, then you get a different result. All right, so that's that exciting tool. Budgets, probably some of you like that little tool. I don't know if you're using them or not, but to do company budgets, pretty simple to set up. You can do your budgets by classes. You can do your budgets by, see, here's my accounts, or by classes. So you can just do a class budget if you want to, run a profit and loss by class. That'll take a longer session, but I just kind of show you that this is available to you. Let's see if we've got a budget set up in here. Reports. Budgets. Okay, so we do. Okay, so here's a budget versus actual for 2011. This is showing it by month. I can show it accounts versus total, so I don't have to look at all those months. Take out my inactive accounts. Run report. So there we are. Here's how we are against actual. I can further customize it and say I don't really want to see that percentage. And these are also clickable, so I can say, wait a minute, why is this just in operating expenses? Let's put this into a specific line item. So I can hit the back button in QuickBooks Online, and then I'll just refresh my, oh, it should be okay. Let's see if it is. Nope, it's not okay. I'll run the report again. Budget versus actual. I could have memorized that and run to my memorized report instead, but here's where I'm doing it. Take that out. Non-zero. So that's what I want you to remember, that while I'm going through and doing all these customizing, you probably want to just memorize your tool when you come up with the one you want. So you look at this and say, wow, I'm over, I'm under, whatever it is that's going on. Make your decisions. You can always email it to somebody. Press the email button and go. I believe that desktop lets you do that now. Press the Excel button. I know that you can do that in desktop, so I can open up Excel and suddenly it pops up in an Excel screen and can make my comments in there if I want to. So, and my alternatives within this is accounts versus classes. Let's see if there was enough data in there to do that. Yep. So now you can see how you were doing in the individual class areas. Some items weren't specified to a class. So this is where I want to fix things. If I see some things that aren't specified, There's a budget that's not specified. I want to go back and fix my budget maybe and see what department that belongs in. If I saw something that's in here and I think, oh, I don't think that's a program expense, I can move it. I think we can customize this to specifics. Let's see. Class, yes we can, so we can say specified. I just want to see programs only, run report. And now I'm just looking at my programs. I can say, that's all I want to see. Memorize. It's real finicky about colons and hyphens and stuff. So you say budgeted versus actual, programs only would be our title. Add this report to my management reports maybe. Ta-da. Go into my management reports. Whoops. Go into my management reports. Here's my management reports. Now it's among my management reports. And if I schedule this, I'll go through that one more time about the scheduling. Here are my management reports. I'm going to send it to myself again. I'm going to have it sent out monthly. I'll have it sent out the 10th of every month. And I'll have it end after one occurrence this time. But I could have it no end date or have it stop after a certain date if I want to. Do one occurrence. Blah, 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 blah. Please attach it as an Excel spreadsheet. Save. If I go back and look at that again, I'll see that the next one that's going on is going to be April 10th. Okay. So those are the memorized reports. We talked about budget and help and scorecard. Let's look at the donor reports a little bit. This is really not supposed to be a donor management tool, but if you are using it for donor information, you can look at income by donor summary, so you can see all of the income that your donors that you've recorded. You can show all the income in here. And the fact that there's expenses in here tells me that somebody reported something through a donor instead of through a vendor. So I could look at this and say, what the heck is this? Arizona Hotel. It says it's a vendor. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, I found a quirk. I would have to go back and see what that is, and I'm not going to waste your time with that. But I would be curious about why those are there. The other donor tools that are in here that are cool. And donors, the word we're using right now, have customer. There's other words you're able to use under preferences. Let's see if it shows us that. Yeah, clients, customers, donors, guests, members. So maybe you want to call them clients or you want to call them guests, whatever term you like to use. In this particular case, we're using donors. So for my donor reports, I could have a donor balance detail. If you use the report list and you haven't checked out this, you can always see in advance what these reports are going to look like by hovering over the magnifying glass, and it'll show you so that you can see if that's really what you're after. So if I want transaction list by donor, I can say, yeah, that's the one I want. Let's see if there's stuff in here for that. All right, so here's my transaction list by donor. So I can see everything that's going on with these individual donors for all dates. And I can probably further customize it and say, show it to me, sort by type, if there was a type, maybe. Let's see. Yep, so it'll segregate my payments and my invoices and things like that. So maybe I want to analyze my donor transactions here before I'm switching into a donor management system. All right. I've got to get rid of my Excel spreadsheet. There we go. Okay, so let's go back to the reports for a moment. On the vendor side, excuse me, when you set up a new vendor, well, you're just getting everything under the sun for me that I normally provide. When you set up a new vendor, and the last thing so we can start going to questions. Somebody writes you, gives you some money, you set them up as a new vendor. Let's do a new vendor list. New vendor XSSS Corp. And let's say you know you're going to pay them some money and you're going to have to issue a 1099 to them. So 123 Park Lane. Make sure you fill in this vendor card. It'll pop up when you try to create a vendor. And make sure you don't say quick add. Go ahead and take the time, put that information in. You'll be glad you did. And if they're going to be needed to be tracked for 1099s, check this tab, put in it, get their number. If that means get a W-9 from them so that you've got a number for them. Save. At the end of the year, when you go to do your 1099s, you go down on your vendor list, hit the Prepare 1099 Miscellaneous Form. And now I've got my list of vendors that qualify. And I can see if I've missed anybody by looking at where are my non-1099 vendors, see if somebody's showing up that I think should have been on there, correct them by checking the box, getting the rest of the data in. So that was just a quickie. All right, I'm going to stop. I'm going to answer questions. Session's 1 hour long, and we've got 20 minutes left to answer questions, so I'm going to pause at this point.
Yeah, great, Carolyn. That was great. Yeah, Carolyn's going to be on the line here for the next 20 minutes. So got a QuickBooks expert here ready to take your questions. It looks like we had a couple in the chat that I know you were taking them as you went along, Carolyn. But,
a couple of them, yeah. I didn't quite catch them all.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Jan here had a question. She's wondering if starting new class assignments, do they have to go back to the start of the data to make it all fall into the class columns, or will it do it automatically?
Okay, they won't do it automatically, but what you can do, if you're starting a new class, so let's do an all dates run report. We're going to do it by class. You'll need to go into your items that are, let's say you've created this new XYZ special event class. You're going to have to go to your non-specified or the items you wanted to move to that, and now you're going to classify it to that. You're going to have to go fix those transactions so that now you've got a complete report. Oh, somebody set up let me see if I get my code. I'm not going to put my code in right now. Anyhow, that's the idea though. You need to go back into the transactions you want to move into that department, into that class, and correct it.
Okay. Looks like a couple of people are typing in now. And did you answer Greg's question about the PDF?
Yeah, a PDF.
Format?
PDF is the default format. You have to click the box to say I want Excel.
Okay, so you have a choice between PDF and Excel there.
Yeah. And if you're looking at the screen right now, you're seeing that what I can do is close the books as of a particular period. So, you know, if you finished off the tax return for a year, I really recommend that you hit the close the box and at least have a warning, but preferably have a password so that nobody accidentally deletes something or changes something from prior year. Right now I'm going to unclose the book so I can make changes in case you guys need changes made on something.
Okay. Well, Rick's got a question here. Actually, he read my mind. I was about to ask this myself. Rick's been using QuickBooks Pro for a while without classes, and he's thinking of moving to QuickBooks Online. So the question is, you know, do you lose any functionality moving to online?
No.
What does he need to know?
Yeah, there's no functionality that we've seen lost moving to online. What happens, though, is you may lose, if you've got some memorized reports, they're not going to move over. If you've got some recurring transactions, you'll have to key your recurring transactions back in. I think all of our lists seem to come over fine. Your budgets, you have to key your budgets back in. If you didn't have classes, then there's nothing to lose, but if you did, that would come over with it.
So budgets is a big thing. Anything else?
Budgets, yeah, if you had like a half a dozen. Yeah. Those are the primary things. Rick, do you have any other questions about that, or does that answer your question?
We'll chime in, but Amanda was also asking if there was anything they need to know from moving to the nonprofit version to the regular version or moving online. You know, is there anything else people really need to know before they do switch to online?
Well, let's see. need to have a decent connection.
Yeah.
It used to be a big issue years ago. It doesn't seem to be as much anymore. It rarely, if ever, goes down, so it's always there. I'm a big proponent of it from the standpoint that it constantly backs up, it constantly updates, and more than one of us can be in there at the same time. Your accountant can come in for free. If you're having an audit performed, we give the auditor a special view-only access. So if I've got an auditor working on this, rather than create a whole bunch of reports for my auditor, I invite them in as a view-only user. So that tends to help a little bit because they can poke around and get the stuff they need.
Are there any major functionality differences between the two?
Well, to me, there's more that I can do it online than I could do it desktop. And I particularly love this memorize and send. I think this is just the boon. This is the best reason to go besides constant backup and constant update. Because remember, when you have desktop, it's licensed to that particular piece of hardware. And maybe you've got one that can be licensed to 2 more, or it's in your network. This one is online. I can work with it on my iPad. I can work with it on my phone. I can pull up reports in case I'm really bizarre and I want to pull up a report on my phone. I can. That functionality was improved just in the last year or so you can do that. So I found that to be really handy when I'm in the field.
And then are there versions of the online versions? Like, is there a nonprofit online?
No, there's nonprofit. As an accountant, I've got some biases because to me the nonprofit version was just somebody going in and customizing the basic version and selling it for something more, which is something you could have always done in the basic version. I'm not a big fan of it unless you are a hospital or a university or have a really big set of things that you're managing, or an A133 audit type person. And even with our A133 audit type clients, we'll still set up departments and divisions for those things and track and can keep in compliance with A133 through QuickBooks Online. So it's just, if you're willing to imagine how you can do it in here, you probably can. One of the challenges I would say with any QuickBooks, whether it's online or desktop, when you're in departments, is that you have to, you can only record a deposit to one department at a time. It only has one location for a deposit. So you'll have to break your deposits up by location if you're going to use that. But that's the only real weirdo thing that I can remember to deal with on it.
Greg here was wondering, is it possible to customize that pie chart categories under the company snapshot?
Only by virtue of what kind of expense categories you already have. That's how you're customizing it, because it breaks it up by the expense or the revenue categories you're currently using. These are specifically what has activity in it. And then if you look below, there were bar charts and other stuff. Yeah, so if you said I want to have different kinds of income, then create other income as a type of account and put your revenue activity in there, and then it will break it out that way for you. And they're going to have more. I guess on the new Harmony version, they're going to have more and more of these kind of pie chart options for you. So you're going to have other opportunities to do further breakout sets, because there's another product on the market called Zero who has even more robust reports. So there's another way for you to do it as well. But you can see down below when I'm using the bar charts, you can do more stuff too. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I'll shut up.
That's great. It seems like most of the questions remaining, pertain to switching from an installed version to the online version. It sounds like a lot of our attendees here do have either the enterprise version or some other installed version, and they're thinking about moving to the online version. I know you talk about that a lot, but anything else that you might warn people about? Or?
It's not a one-way street. That's the nice part. So, if you said, I'm going to go to QuickBooks Online, and you had asked about versions, the only thing there is in the way of versions is there's something that's like an Essentials version, which is just, I don't need a lot of crazy reports. I just want to record my income, my expenses, and my balance sheet. And then Online and an Online Plus. So there's some slight pricing differences between those things. And the Online is running like, I think, $39 a month, something like that, and it's 10% less if you pay for a year. And if you're working with your accountant may get we get a further discount that we pass on to our clients. And so you may be working with somebody. To go there, you really just, when you're in QuickBooks, your desktop, and you're you're doing a file, a backup, one of your options is the utility line, and it says back it up as a QuickBooks Online version. And it'll create a file that ends in .oe. That .oe file is the file that gets uploaded into QuickBooks Online. That's how you transfer your data in here. So if you open up a shell on QuickBooks Online and you import that data, and in 20 minutes they say it's there, it's ready for you to use, and then you just start using it.
Cool. And I just sent a link over through the chat that shows the 3 online versions. Looks like they got the simple that you said, and then essentials, and then plus.
Yeah.
Looks like there's 3 versions there.
And then somebody's asking, oh, where are you on it? You talked about Amanda, Enterprise. Yeah, you can go to
Amanda and
any of
Nancy
these
there.
to do it. Yeah. This question about recording reports, actual versus budget. Yeah, they're actual versus budget. Let's see. Monthly report. No, it's a budget report. So let's do report list. It is the same, though. You're asking basically, is it the same? It's the same kind of report you were doing before. Actual versus budget. I can do the customizing. I can say versus month, versus quarters, versus total. Classes versus total if I want to. I can say dollars remaining if I want to do that. So I've got all sorts of little customized, but it seems to me they're the same ones I saw when I was on desktop.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the difference again is I can memorize this and save it for later because I've come up with some wacky way that I sorted it, and I don't want to forget how I did it. So you know, you're dealing with, whenever you're creating reports, you're thinking about who's your audience. So I've got a management side that's an audience. I've got board that's an audience. I might have a grantor that's an audience. I might have a lender that's an audience. So how do I make a report that I can keep twisting around to get it in all these different ways? So if you think for the end, where am I going, and then try to work backwards to how do I get there?
Mm-hmm.
That's my method. And as I said, I'll be an email away from any of you guys if you need more clarification on where this stuff. And the payroll does merge to the online version. The payroll does link in. So does merchant accounts links in, banking links in. All those things can be added in. I see those kinds of questions. So you've got online banking. Set up all your connections. Bring them all in. Payroll merge. Grant reporting. I do grant reporting either as departments or as classes, and so it really depends on how many things you're trying to track. If you were just one column for admin, one column for fundraising, and several columns for your grantors, you could create your grantors as your classes. If you have way more things going on, then I would use your grantors as departments, and then you can run a report by department and see how your department is doing. The one nice thing about QuickBooks versus many other software packages is that you're not limited on the period that you cover. So if you're running a profit and loss by class and you want to see how I was doing just in one particular class, let's say you had training events was your, let's just say that was your grantor. So specified, and I know we're running low on time, but I'm going to do it really fast. Training events, run report, customize, total only. I can say show me all dates for this particular grantor, and then I can customize it for years if I want to, or whatever I want to do. And now I've got everything I've done with this grantor from the beginning. So if I've got a grant that comes in the middle of this year, but it ends, it's a 2-year grant, I can see all of the activity for the entire grant. So what else can I put? Restricted, unrestricted. I'm looking at Amanda's questions. For example, do you recommend setting it up to mirror the audited statements? Well, that's what I'm trying to do when I'm doing my classes, is management in general, fundraising program. Unrestricted, restricted, you can do that, but you know, if it works for you, it's fine. You know, if that's a good way to deliver it to the auditor, and you want to look at time savers. How do I get it out to people and save my time on this stuff? It could be restricted, and unrestricted becomes departments instead, and it doesn't muck up the P&L for other readers who don't understand what you mean. You know, you just have to know who your audience is. So let's see. So contributions would be the account. Programs would be the class. Various funds would be the departments. Yep, that would work. That's right, Lori. That would work. Example you just did. The heading doesn't tell you what you chose, or did I miss something? Oh, the report that I just ran, I was doing all dates. I can customize that. I can change the dates to last year, this year, last year. Let's do last year, because I think there's more activity in that. Run report. There's the period. This is just the profit and loss. Oh, it doesn't say what specific class, because I forgot to put the name in. So you have to take the time to do the header, footer, and write in. This was training 2, I think. 2. So yeah, when you're making these custom reports, you do want to take time and write that.
Great. Well, cool. I know we're running out of time here. Carolyn, I want to give you a chance to let people know where they can find out more about you if they have any additional questions, or maybe you want to chat with you.
Our website is azcpa.com, Arizona CPA, and I can be reached at Carolyn, CAROLYN, at azcpa.com. And I welcome your emails. There's no problem at all. That's my name there, Carolyn Sechler.
And you're on Twitter? People use Twitter?
I am on Twitter at Carolinguini. I can type it in that message. AROLINGUINI. And we have a, oops, I typed it wrong. NGUINI. And we have a Facebook page, and we're everywhere. We've got a Pinterest site, a Facebook page, and we've got a newsletter. We update we put all sorts of stuff on here on the newsletter all the time. So if you want to get on our newsletter, let us know, please. We'll happy to.
Yeah, that's a nice newsletter. I would recommend people do sign up for that. There's some good resources.
Thank you. We really love when I'm bragging on my daughter because she's the one who manages all of our social media. They maintain she maintains a curated list of webinars every week that are coming up that are free or cheap. So, oh, Greg, thank you. Love the messages I'm getting. Great to have fans on this. I hope that you guys have found some value. I know I whizzed through this stuff, but Dawn and I and Polly do this every day for people. If you need any help at all, you just let us know. It's one of the tools we really like, and it's been really reliable for us on the things that we need to do.
Yeah, well, this was fun, Carolyn. This is going to be a great resource, this video recording. So I will be sending that out to everyone a little later this afternoon. But do check out Carolyn online. Do sign up for that newsletter, and feel free to reach out to her. Carolyn, thanks a lot for this. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to do this again, let me know, or has some special area they want to talk about, let me or these guys know. We'll do another one.
Cool. Well, thanks to everyone who attended. Do look for an email from me a little later this afternoon. But other than that, have a great rest of your day.